One of the most valuable tools in Rhino is learning how to make more complex shapes. Now, we've already dealt with the box here, right? We've learned how to put a box in space, move it around, maybe scale it up and down using either the gumball or the scale commands. But in this case, let's start to look at some ways that we can make more complex objects. And that's going to be through using the Boolean commands, which are used or found down in this box here. It says by default Boolean union, but if you click on this little triangle, you'll see that a whole bunch of different things happen here. Okay, so we're going to be sort of dealing with these few here. We're not going to really look at some of these other ones. These would be a little bit more advanced. Okay, but for now, let's look at how to make a more complex shape. Okay, so I'm just going to delete this box here, and I'm going to create another one. Let's call this a cylinder, and we're just going to look at how Rhino creates shapes. Okay, so if I create a new layer for cylinder, I'm going to make that layer active by making sure that my check mark is on it. Don't just highlight the layer because you're not going to be actually working in that layer, but make that layer active by making sure that it's checked. Okay, and then let's come down here and let's click on the cylinder. Okay, so same deal as before. I always like to set things to my origin here. I just find it a really useful way. So I'm going to make this, and let's call this 4 inches as a radius, okay? And maybe we want to make this a 12-inch cylinder, okay? And let's come back to box here. I'm going to make, maybe I need to make a hole in a box. So I'm going to make another box here. I'm going to type in the command box. And in this case, I don't want to be on the origin because you'll find that if I do go to the origin, then it's going to occupy the same space as the cylinder. I'm going to make it a 4-inch cube. Okay. And we don't really want that. All right. Because sometimes I can actually lose objects inside of other objects. And so here you can actually see the, I believe they call this Z fighting, where it's two objects are occupying the same sort of space, and it'll do that. So anytime you see that, it's probably a good opportunity for you to maybe move it out of there and get it somewhere else. So I'm just going to put it over here. Okay. Actually, I'm going to put it over. I'm going to make sure that I'm on my build plane here, my C plane. Okay. I'm going to scale this one up. Let's work on our scale here, and let's make this a 12-inch box. Fantastic. So what happens if I want to maybe put a hole in it? And I'm going to use this cylinder to put a hole in it. So in this case, I'm going to move my cylinder over, or I could actually use my move command, which I prefer because I can be a little bit more choosy with my move command. And you'll note that I haven't clicked on anything yet, but I'm actually allowing my cursor to hover over these O-snap points so that my smart track is finding the intersection of these points. Or in the case of a cylinder, I can make sure my center snap is enabled. If I hover over that circle there, it'll find its center. And I can click on that and move it. And I'm just going to find the midpoint here. There we go. All right. So by doing that, now I can click it and it's found its midpoint here. Okay, so if I want to put a hole in the top of this cube, what I want to do is I'm actually going to drop this object into the cube so that it intersects it somewhere. And maybe I don't want to do that. Maybe I want to be more precise. I'm going to go, let's tell it to go down -3 inches. All right, so now we know that it's a -3 inches into the cube. So in order to put a hole into this, we're going to run what's called the Boolean difference command, okay? And I'm going to hit enter, and it's going to ask me select surfaces or polysurfaces to subtract from. And I'm going to say I'm going to subtract from this object here. And I'm going to hit enter. And then it says select surfaces or polysurfaces to subtract with. And one thing before we proceed, I just want you to be aware of this. Delete input equals yes. Okay, just remember that once we've run this command. So I'm going to click on the cylinder and I'm going to hit enter. And there we go. The cylinder is gone. So that's what happens when delete input equals yes. It just says that anything that we've Boolean differenced with is the width is going to go and it's going to leave us the imprint. But you can see that it's caused a hole in the top of this, okay, an indentation of some type. If I control Z that, and let's run the Boolean difference again, hit enter. This time I'm going to make sure that my delete input equals no. And now I'm going to click on this cylinder, and you can see that that cylinder remains. So if you need to preserve an object, but you need to sort of subtract from another object with that object, then make sure your delete input is set to no. And now I can move this out of the way and I can see that it's still attained the same thing. Okay. Now the other thing that I can do is I can put a hole in this one, but maybe I want to go all the way through, in which case I'm going to expand this with my gumball and drop this into place here. Now, if I wanted to be really choosy, what I would do is I would actually move this. Okay, I'm going to move with the center in mind. And I'm going to use my midpoints. Sometimes it takes if you have too many smart objects selected, sometimes you got to try it again. Okay, midpoint, midpoint. Oh, that did not work at all. And sometimes this happens, right? Sometimes, you got too many things going on. That's okay. We're going to try it one more time. We're going to go from the center to from the midpoint. Very confused right now, and that's because the center snap is enabled. One more try. There we go. Now we got it in the middle. So you can see that sometimes it just takes a little bit of patience to get it set properly and a couple of tries. And now I'm going to just run this a little wild out. And sometimes I think with Boolean commands, it's better to run things a little wild, okay? But then I'm going to run this again. I'm going to go Boolean difference. This time I'm going to make sure my delete input is set to yes. And I'm going to select the object, and there we go. Okay, so that's the Boolean difference command. So now you can see that it's subtracted, and this is where things can get sort of creative. And I think a good way to think about subtractively modeling in Rhino is, in a way, you're kind of making the tool that carves the void out, okay? Maybe that's a way to think about it. You're making a tool that then subtracts from the object, okay? So that's Boolean difference. The next one we want to do is we're going to do a Boolean union, which is going to do the opposite, actually. So I'm just going to take this, I'm going to move this off the side. I'm going to create a new box at the origin, okay? And let's make it a 8-inch cube. Okay. In this case, let's do something kind of crazy. Let's do a pyramid. Why not, right? Because we like house-looking things. Just kidding. But let's here we can with a pyramid we can change the number of sides. If we click on that, it's just going to ask how many sides do I want this pyramid to have. I'm going to say 4. Okay, and it says center of inscribed pyramid. So I'm going to tell it, okay, I want the center of it to be here. And you can see it's actually already starting to trace out my pyramid. So maybe I want to make it, a little bit bigger. And if I hold shift, it's gonna want to constrain it sort of in this manner. And I could do it this way. I could go something like that and that, and then I could always rotate it back to 45 degrees so that it's lined up like this. Okay. Right now we have two different objects, right? If we can click on them separately. Oops. Control Z. All right. But what happens if we want these objects to be the same? Or maybe I want this to be a cube with a pyramid-like top to it. So let's go back and I'm going to delete this. I'm going to make another pyramid to the center. And I'm just going to find the corner. There we go. So maybe we want this to be like 1. Okay. So I'm going to select both of these now. And I'm going to run the Boolean union command. So I can just type in Boolean union, or I can just click on this right away. And now you can see it says creating meshes, great. And if I click on this, click off, it's one object, okay? And if I look at it under properties, here it says closed solid poly surface. So in Rhino, these solids are known as poly surfaces, okay? So that's Boolean difference, Boolean union. And you can imagine that you can get pretty complex with things. We can actually start to, I'm going to turn that center snap off, but we could, start to add things to it, right? And maybe we want to Boolean union this again. Okay, there we go. So now we know that this is one object. When you start getting into coplanar faces like this, generally we like to clean this up, right? You can actually see this seam here as an artifact of what the objects were before. But I like to clean it up. So what I actually like to do after I've done a Boolean union is I'm going to type in merge all coplanar faces, okay? And you see that it actually gets rid of that sort of artifact seam and an ISO curve here, which is what these are called. They're not actually anything that you can manipulate per se. But these are called the ISO curves. Sort of, they show roughly, kind of where the center of that face is. Okay, which can be helpful in modeling, but to help you find the midpoint. But that's the Boolean command.